Hey, this is going to be a pretty impromptu tutorial. It's basically just going to be some GECK related stuff, and for anyone who's interested, how the New Vegas Zombies mod works. So basically, you're just going to load it up in the GECK with GECK extender and all of your required script extenders, and it would be just like any other mod. Everything is going to have a prefix of NVZ, with the exception of one sound file that I ended up getting for the PPSH from I think it was Jinpoko. Um, yeah, and so the majority of this mod is based through script. So there's a lot of scripts. That's how the different things work. And then we've got the actual world space, which you're gonna find in your cell view window. And there's two worlds at the time of this being made for the two maps. We've got the Sierra Madre world and the world space, which is the first map, which is kind of knocked styled. And so you'll see here we have this environment surrounded completely by this cloud, but the cloud doesn't really appear until a scripted event comes up. And make sure that you have your show hide window. You can see terrain, and you're going to want to see markers. And so what these are not an audio marker, it's a plane marker. These are occlusion planes. And what these occlusion planes do is they make it so that way anything that is past it will not be rendered. So that means if you're looking at this wall, anything that's on the other side of it will not render on your screen. So it saves performance. But you want to be sparing in them because they do still use computer resources. The standard setup for barriers, which are a new feature, is a little interesting. So there's a script attached to these barriers, and let me show you. So what you're gonna do is, if you want to do barriers at all, you're not going to be able to do it like this, because barriers actually work. Sorry about that. Barriers work off of an invisible door. So you're going to go to the barrier door, go to model, and you're going to look. Bear with me. One of these. Basically, you're just gonna scroll through and you're gonna give things textures until eventually you'll be able to see a door appear. That's good enough for us. So you've got yourself. It's really not good enough. Yeah, this really is horrible. There it is. So it's utility door 1, 13. Yeah. So basically, you're going to want to give it textures so you can see it, because it's actually just an invisible door that you'd see in the metros of Fallout 3. And so the way that it works is the zombies will walk over to it through nav meshing, and they'll try to open it. And this door has a script on it. And the script is for unactivate. So every time it gets clicked by either the player or by a zombie, it'll run the script. And so it's got a few variables. The condition, with the smaller number being the better condition and the larger number being the more destroyed it is, with 6 meaning that it is completely broken. And then there's the destroy timer, which represents how many seconds need to pass before it can be activated again, because this is what stops the player from being able to like spam click instant repair it, and this is also responsible for preventing the zombies from being able to instantly destroy the barrier. Because what's happening is the zombies, when they pathfind up to this door, they're going to be clicking on this thing a lot. For some reason, the AI is programmed to spam that thing. So what happens is this activate, it's going to check the timer, and if the timer is not finished, then it's basically just going to ignore the sequence entirely. So yeah, from there on, what it does is it actually every time it gets activated, it pulls references. So there are things in the GECK known as linked references. And a linked reference is basically like a buddy of some kind or a parent. It's a link. So for example, if I wanted to give this perk machine a linked reference, I would double click on it and scroll to the side using these little arrows, click linked ref, and then select it in the 3D world. In order for something to be selected, though, it needs to be marked as a persistent reference, which, to mark something as a persistent reference, you click on it, and it should be right here. So, to continue, the barrier will always be linked straight to a specific linked reference. It's one of the corresponding boards. Normally, I try to set up a method for it, and so in this scenario, the linked reference, I think it would be this board. Let's just cheat. I have a dummy one set up out of bounds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the first board in this case that would get taken down would be this one, because it is the linked reference. Notice how I click on it. So we have the door selected, and you can see this arrow going straight into the board. And then from that board, it goes into the other board that was marked as the second, and then that second board has a linked reference of the third board, and so on and so forth. And so that's how we're able to get the order of our boards, is through these linked references. Board 1 is the linked reference of this item, and then board 2 is the linked reference of that other board. And then board 3 is the board that was linked from the other board until you have your 6th board. And then finally, RTR, which is the standard way of me saying the person who is the subject, the target reference. Even if it doesn't necessarily make sense for the context to be a target, it's still the person who is the subject, and so they are referred to as the target reference. In this case, it would be either a zombie or a player. We use getAR, which is getActionRef. From there, we get into the nitty-gritty. Play sound. We do some variables. R IRB is the amount of barriers that you've repaired this round. ICP is the amount of points that you currently have. And IFP is your finalized points or finishing points. That's how many points you finished the game with. It's a completely separate tracked number, but it should always be added to when you add current points. Because this is the number that you see at the end of the game when you die. When it says that you have 10,000 points, but you only currently have like 100, it's because you've collected 10,000 points throughout the whole match, not because you currently have 10,000 points. Here, it will reset the destruction timer, which is how long between hits. It'll set it to 1 second. So that's basically the time that it would take for the player to click and for the little animation to play of the board appearing, or the time that it would take the zombie to rip a board off. So you could set it to a smaller number. You could set it to 0.5 if you think that a player could build it faster, or you could set it to 2 or 3, however long you think it should take that animation to play out and for that person to commit the action. If you think that a zombie should take even longer to repair it, you could set it to 10. That would be 10 seconds per board that needs to be ripped off. You have complete control through the scripting. Now, of course, if you wanted to, you could copy this script and make a completely new script by going to script on the GECK, right-clicking, new, paste, give it a new name like 2, and then you could just customize it. Make sure that you attach it to something though. And so you could do whatever you wanted. Say you wanted to do a barrier with more boards, you would just continue to repeat the same pattern that is already there. But that's boring stuff. Nobody probably cares about barriers. So the way that the zombies actually work, I thought about it for a while, is it's done through a quest script. So quests in the GECK are ways of keeping a script running all the time. And it's generally a bad practice to have too many of these running at once. So if you're going to make a mod with a quest script that constantly runs for the entirety that the game is active, it's a good idea to make sure that it is necessary, because too many of these scripts running at once can very much so bog down your game. This is a very bulky script, but I also don't expect players to run this mod in a legitimate playthrough. I would not recommend that. Not because I think the mod is poorly made, but because I just don't think that it fits Fallout, and I don't think that it's good to experiment with, the changes that it makes. It makes some changes that may otherwise not fit well with the world. And like I said, it's a little taxing. But in any case, we've got variables. We've got all kinds of these numbers and references, and they're all annotated, so you could probably figure out what they are through reading the script. I'll try and go into it as I go through. So basically, this script will begin running. It's got a check and balance to make sure that it's not always going through the rest of its procedure unless you've entered the map. which is what this S variable or S active is, it'll only be 1 if you have gone through the grave at the beginning. So what this does is S nuke. This is how we perform the nuke action. This is when the zombies blow up and their heads explode. That's S nuke. And so whenever it's 1, there's a variable on the zombie script that makes them die. I'll show you real quick. Script, generic zombie script. Alright, yeah. So if S nuke is equal to 1, and then it kills them according to the player, and then it, gives them their little fire explosion. So what this does is it basically sets that to 0, so that way you don't instantly win. Because if the variable never goes back to 0, the zombies would always be blowing up. The zombies would never stop blowing up. Which, I mean, some people might like that, but there's really no purpose to that. So this is our way of detecting when to heal the player, because in Call of Duty, the player will heal over time after the zombies hit them or after you take damage. Fallout does not naturally have a health regeneration system, and I figure that this is more interesting than just giving the player a spell effect that regenerates them. So instead what it does is it checks for when the last time you got hit was. And so every time you get hit, anytime you take any kind of damage from my environments, you will end up taking on an effect called NVZ Timer 5 seconds effect. It's a little bit of a debug effect. It's used to track it's used to track various debugging things, and I don't think I'm using that word right. It's used to track various features, these effects that don't actually do anything. They're just used as fake timers. And you might be asking why I don't just set a quest variable like float something timer and then do get seconds passed. It's because I've found that when you have too many objects in the world space with the with a with a game mode script attached to them, it does something to the timers, and the timers don't process time properly. Maybe that's just on my end, but at the very least, I don't want anyone to experience any more bugs than they need to. So I found that it's a very safe approach to just give fake timers via effects to nullify basically all of those timer issues where timers can break. I've found that timers are very fragile and you need to be very careful with them. Otherwise, they'll go on indefinitely. All this does is it waits, it checks when the last time you got hit was. If it's past that time, you will heal. I don't think it's actually 5 seconds anymore. I think that it was 5 seconds at one point, but I think it's now down to like, oh no, it's still 5 seconds. Yeah, so every 5 seconds, basically, you will heal. This checks if there are any zombies currently around. So ZP, that's the zombie placeholder variable. Yeah, I guess I just never ended up naming that variable. So it's one of the most important variables in this entire script. So the zombie placeholder variable is responsible for determining when to spawn zombies. If this number is greater than 0, then but we're gonna spawn zombies. It's basically how many zombies are left in the round. So if it is greater than 0, and then it determines, um, based on this equation, whether or not to make the zombie a runner zombie. So this basically means that up until like round 7, you won't get consistent runners. I think that's how it works. Basically, you won't get any walking zombies after round 7. And it allows it to be chance based that a zombie will be a runner or a walker before then. And it's literally impossible at round 1 for you to get running zombies. This here, let IZT equal get count NVZ normal zombie list versus the zombies list. Slow zombies and whatnot. So what this is doing is it's pulling zombie types from a list, because that's how you get the variety in the zombies, is through a list. So we use something known as a form list. Some people prefer arrays. Arrays are definitely very useful, but I'm not too sure about how to use arrays, and I think that this works fair enough for what I'm going for. So basically what we do is we've got these lists, and they've got default to them, but if you'd ever like, you can use scripts to change what is in these lists, or you could just physically edit them, but I would recommend against that, because that's just, we call that a dirty edit. So if I was to go in here and I was going to go edit this and like add an extra type of zombie to this list and then save it and then upload it to the Nexus, we would consider that a dirty edit, because you are making an edit to this form, which means that if another person edits this same thing directly the same way you did, but doing something different, it's going to have an incompatibility with each other. Whereas instead, if you use a script to add something to it, it doesn't matter if they made a change in a way that they shouldn't, because your addition will go in there and their addition will go in there, and there will be harmony. These are in here because they are the default zombie types. If you do not want to use these, you're going to want to use list remove form before beginning, and then list add form after the fact. I think those are the correct functions. Definitely double check me on that one, because one of them stays through the save, one of them does not, and so every time you reboot your computer, it'll just fucking, you will not have zombies in that list. So continuing through, basically these are the different conditions. So this is the if it's a runner normal list, and this is the else, which is if it's, I just realized, gotta properly space this. Alright, yeah, and so this would be the if it's a slow zombie. Oh yeah, zombie type, my bad. Integer I zombie type, IZT. So that's basically the, if we look in this list of, say, normal zombies. So we've got all these zombies types, right? So basically it's pulling what type of zombie to spawn, because these are all different types of zombies. This is one type of zombie. Now they're all virtually the same. They all run the same script. They all have the same health. The only difference, really, is that they look different. which is cool. We like variety. What is that? They call it diversity nowadays. Yeah. This script has definitely undergone a lot of changes in the past. It used to be a lot more simple, and it definitely didn't work as well. I've tried to make it more modular, because if at some point in the future somebody would like to make a map that isn't me, and it wouldn't be a part of this main pack, I want people to be able to make additional ESPs and ESMs that can run alongside this, use this as a master, and then use the main script to basically run their own maps. This here, following the fact, is what checks for the boss round. Now currently this is not very modular, I will say. I could probably uh, you know what? Actually, I know what we're gonna do. I know exactly what we're gonna do. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make a new list, and by default, there will be nothing. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make it so that way it pulls this. So basically what this does is there we go. I don't know what I was doing wrong. Anyways, so basically what it does is it pulls from there, and there you'll have a corresponding zombie type. So now that we've done that, we need to make sure that we add zombies to that list. So we're going to go to the script that starts, and the match starts. Actually, we'll go to the terminals. So this is the debug terminal that sets the map configurations up. That's it will not be. It'll not be like that. It'll be more like add form to form list. So basically, what we're doing here is adding zombies to this list. List add the form list, boss zombie list, and then we're going to add the zombie type. So we're going to go to creature, and for map 1, the zombie type is the leaper, or, well, more so actually the Nova Crawler, and then bam, we have our zombie for the map. Now, the logic behind this is that if it pulls from the first boss type on that list, then, alright, my brain is kind of hurting long day at work. Yes. So it pulls the zombie type from this list. And so if we add this zombie to that list, and it's the only thing in that list, it's the first spot on that list, and we pull from that first spot on the list, we're basically dynamically giving the map a boss versus creating a more complicated and less compatible script. Here what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing basically, except instead of an NVZ Leaper zombie, we're going to do Hellhound. And so now, next time I load up the game, that'll actually be a better script, unless it doesn't work. That'll suck. Alright, so yeah, so now that we've got that boss round out of the way, basically that just checks if we're gonna spawn a boss. Because if boss round is equal to 1, we're basically overriding this from earlier. Because otherwise, normal zombies would spawn on the round. But because it's a boss round, it's going to spawn the boss instead. Now you might be like, well, how do we know if it's a boss round? Nothing in the game is hard-coded to say it's a boss round. So this stuff that's actually up here, even though it's first in the script, it's actually not the stuff that is to come first. Because the script is constantly running, remember? So there's parts of this script that are being run before it begins again. So continuing on, this is old. This is from when I used to use string variables to construct spawn locations. We don't do that anymore. Oh, I still keep these in here for good measure. Even though I never released it like that, so the only person's game I would be bloating would be myself. So here, what we're doing is we're getting the spawn location. So the way that it works is also through form lists, believe it or not. Now, we don't physically drag specific forms into this list. It's actually completely empty. It's the spawn locations list. Completely empty list. So how do we even spawn zombies from an empty list? Well, that's what this is. We're letting the spawn location equal get count, and the way that works is when you start the match, it actually is scripted to add spawn locations into that list. We'll go into that later. Right now I'm going into the mechanics of how it works, so that way later when I explain how to do those things, you would understand what the relevance would be. Theoretically, you could go backwards, and realistically nobody is going to use this. But that's besides the point. Basically, we put more things in that list, so that way you can cycle through the list, choose one at random, and then bam, it uses that reference as a spawn location. And those references, if we turn on our markers again, are these little red X's. Not that one though, some of them. Like that, for example, spawn location. That, spawn location. Spawn location. These are spawn locations that the zombies can come in. And so the way that we dynamically shift spawn locations, like in the Sierra Madre, is through triggers. On the first map, there's only one, and it's not really that relevant because there's not a whole lot of room. But on this map, there's triggers everywhere because there's all kinds of spawn rooms, all kinds of locations for zombies to need you to spawn in. So in the first room, it's hard-coded via the script. Like, they will only ever spawn from in here and here. However, the moment that you cross certain thresholds, which are triggers in orange, you enter a new area. So this one does not actually qualify you as entering a new area. This one is for telling you, or for saying that you've entered the first room. This other one is for saying that you've entered the second room. This is the one that would now change the spawn location. Because now that you're in the second room, you need spawns for the second room. And so zombies will begin to spawn in these piles, I believe. They'll spawn in this pile. I think they'll spawn around this corner and around this corner. And it also checks if doors are open. You can check that by checking the scripts. Not that one. Um, Trigger script. Yeah. So it checks if certain doors are opened. It gives you the opportunity to add more spawns to the list. Because that's like, obviously you don't want to spawn them in that area if the player hasn't opened the door yet. However, if the player has opened this door, it would be silly for you to not allow zombies to spawn in that way and possibly cut the player off. Because if you don't do that, then that means that that door would just be open for players to run through. There would be no threat ever appearing on the other side. But the moment that you make it so that way zombies can start spawning in there, it creates a new kind of tension. Zombies come from there too, shutting off areas the player can run to. Zombies will spawn over here, and they'll spawn over here. I think the only place that they could really go is up here, and then they back themselves into a corner with a window that more zombies can come from. And that is how you trap people. Continuing down the list from spawn locations, we're going to check and see if the zombie type is a Hellhound. This determines the behavior for how the Hellhounds will spawn in. Now, this isn't really too important. This is more so basically just to prevent tons from spawning in spam amounts. Because in the real games, I think it's only like 2 per player will spawn at once. So that basically is just what this is. It limits it, and it also makes them spawn with their little explosion of lightning. And it plays their little sound. That's about it. This does the same thing for the little crawly guys, the little Nova crawlers, except rather than checking if it's 2, it checks if it's 24. Hmm. Actually, come to think about it, it's not just Nova crawlers, it's also for the normal ones. Um, Only Hellhounds are limited. Nova crawlers and normal zombies will spawn up to 24 zombies in the map at once. There used to not be a cap on the Nova crawlers when there would be 50. That would be miserable. This is deprecated, I think. No, I guess it isn't. like I said, a lot of this script I wrote a long time ago, months ago. Not really a long time ago, but a decent bit. So some of it is still kind of fuzzy to me because it's been a little bit since I've looked at it and worked on it. Especially the stuff that's been working since I made it a year ago. Because this has been in the works for about a year at the time that I'm making this. This here basically just checks the beginning of the round, and this is where we start setting stuff into motion for the round. This is where we set the round number up. This is where it tells you what round it is. This is what triggers map events. So like at round 10, and then you get that audio from Samantha. If you haven't heard it, it sounds like this. You will never succeed in this, Edward! Yeah, kind of creepy. Anyways, this is what triggers map events like that all the way up until the end. And all the way up until the zombies, their little identification, little crisis. And then shit blows up. Um, this is related to the cooldown system. Basically over time, the teleporter will cool down on the Sierra Madre. It's not super dynamic. If you want to use the same system, it's going to be there. You can use the same system, but other than that, it doesn't really serve a whole purpose for all of the maps. It has literally no purpose on the first map, only the Sierra Madre map, as far as I remember. This is for bouncing betties, aka the frag mines. It basically is just what determines adding them to your inventory at the beginning of a round. This is for frag grenades. Does the same thing. Basically, just tracks that you're not going over the quantity of 2 for mines and going over the quantity of 4 for grenades. It does a little bit of math. Not to say that you don't drop the grenades on the ground and go pick them up later, but that's literally impossible because I attach a script to them. I think. I have to test that. This checks the current round. It checks, is it a boss round? Boss round is every 5 rounds. Exactly on the dot. I should make it do math. Anyways, it checks if the power is on, or if the map is not the first map. This is also not the most dynamic system. I could probably come up with something a little more interesting, a little more effective than checking and seeing if it's the first map or not. Because maybe someone wants to make a map where the bosses only trigger on certain events. This would not be very effective for that. I could probably come up with some kind of other script for determining situations for bosses based on map, and then just implement it like that. But in the meantime, it just checks, is the map is it the first round, or is it the first map, or is it the second map? If it's the first map, then power needs to be on for bosses to spawn. They will not spawn if the power is off. Otherwise, it just doesn't give a fuck. It'll spawn as many of them as possible. This is an old remnant from the old boss zombie before the map ever released, before any of it ever released. So if the map is the first map, then it'll allow for the zombie count to be 5 plus the current round times 3. So basically what this is saying is that 33% more Nova Crawlers will spawn on a Nova Crawler round, then normal zombies would spawn on a zombie round, if it were a zombie round. So the Nova Crawlers, obviously, less health, smaller, they explode, kind of annoying, easier to kill, but there's way more of them. This here, hmm, it just checks other conditions. Oh, my bad. Hmm. It's basically 3 times more zombies. So what this does is every time a round begins, you force the weather, so that way it's not shitty. Hmm, my bad. I forgot this is boss round. So this is what makes the map dark. And then we reset bear traps. Again, not the most dynamic system. Probably use improvements. At this point, we set the zombie placeholder value, which is how many are currently left in the map. We set it to the zombie counter, which is the total that are supposed to be in that round. We set the boss round to 1. Update stats. That's what allows the zombies to update their stats, I believe. Based on whether or not Richtofen is in control, determines what audio files play. This is the barriers. This is what is IBR? Oh, okay. So this basically says if this was supposed to be a boss round and it isn't, make the next boss round 5 rounds later. That's for the first map. It's kind of like the Pentagon Thief on 5. If it's round 7 and you don't get the Pentagon Thief or something like that, and turn on the power, like you can't come like immediately. You gotta wait like a few rounds. This, it just checks. Is it a boss round? Wait, is that redundant? I think it is. It's upsetting. Although it's way too late for me to be making any executive decisions on what I want to do with moving things that might break it. This checks if things are working. If so, beacon the behavior. So this sets no deaths this round. No zombies have died. This sets the zombie count. This sets the zombies alive. This sets the barriers that you can repair total before you stop getting points. And this sets the amount that you've repaired so far this round. If the round is won, sets their HP to 150. If it is greater than 1, but less than 10, it'll be 50 plus the round times 100. And if it is greater than 10, or well, 10 or greater, then their health will be what it was before, but multiplied by 1.1. Finally, update stats is over. Play the sound that you hear at the beginning of the game, the ever so familiar. And there you go. Doors are very simple. Aside from making sure to remember to put triggers for where you want to spawn zombies, it's basically just as simple as you put something that you mark as a door with a script that will make it behave like a door. You can copy doors. You can very easily just copy something and then change the model of it. Basically, it's the same formula of if it's been opened or if it hasn't been opened and you have enough points and you are the player, then it'll remove the points from your inventory, or not inventory, but it'll remove points. It'll make the thing disappear. It'll spawn a little bit of lightning, and then the lightning will disappear a few seconds later. If the lightning never disappeared, this is what it would look like. Mystery boxes can always be seen based on the light in the sky, where they are, just like in the real games. Although this is the only time that you will ever experience all of these lights, unless you get the mythical fire sale, which isn't even in the game yet, but besides the point. They're a bit of a complex system. I'm gonna get into that another time. I hope that this has been good. Going over some of the basics. I know nobody's gonna use this to make any maps, but I don't know. Maybe you learned something about the GECK. Maybe you pity me for making this dumb shit. No, I'm very happy with this project. I don't take it too seriously, but at the same time, I really like it. Like, I know that it's not game changing. Like, I know this isn't like the next B42 or anything crazy like that, but I think it's fun, you know? It's something to hone my skills and something I guess people can enjoy. I've definitely enjoyed playing through it a good bit. Alright, guys.